Saints lost for the first time since September on Tuesday night. 3-1 the final score. Bristol City scoring 3 second-half goals to end our 25-game unbeaten run in all competitions. I must point out that this podcast was planned before then. It's not a reaction to that. It's not a meltdown special. This is just a generic run-of-the-mill extra pod to help with all the demands. Glenn, I guess we have to start with Bristol City. To be fair, they thoroughly deserved that win.
Yeah, they did. And it was very much a performance like they put on at St Mary's, only they scored the first goal this time. They restricted us. They kept the spaces very sort of like short in defence and stopped us from playing through them. And then they clearly had a plan to hit us on the break behind the fullbacks. Get down the sides and get crosses into the middle. It was only because they couldn't sort of like connect all the dots in the first half. A number of crosses came in, and sometimes it found players, but they missed, and all that sort of stuff. And they played very well. Unlike at St Mary's, they found the finish in the second half, though. And they probably will admit they had a little bit of fortune on both the first two goals, because the first goal, he tries to play a 1-2 and it bounces off a small bone. If he'd played the 1-2 and it had come off his own player like he intended, he would have been offside. But yeah, they scored from that, and the second goal, it wasn't a corner. It came back off Harwood Bellis, hit the guy, went off. But having conceded the corner, obviously you've got to defend it better than we did, which was just standing there and watching the biggest guy in the park head it into the net. So, but as Russell Martin said afterwards, we had chances before they scored. I mean, he mentioned two, which was the sort of Edozie half chance that he floated onto the bar, and the one that Adam Armstrong hit straight at the keeper. But I thought the worst miss was the one right at the start of the second half, when we nicked the ball sort of like high up the park. Armstrong slightly overhit the pass. Edozie didn't control it properly, and then the cross, and then Brooks tried to take out the goalpost. That was the worst miss, because basically we made a mess of it. And that should have been 1-0. And then it's a different game. They showed at St Mary's, Bristol City don't really have a plan B other than sit deep and play on the breaks. So, but fair play to Bristol. Can't complain. The third goal was a really good goal. And yeah, they deserve to win. And we've, as you said at the start, we had to lose sometime. I just felt like it almost seemed like one game too many for a lot of players. It just seemed like a number kind of hit the wall, didn't play particularly well, didn't have the energy. If you compare it to our away game at Swansea, when we had, midfielders pelting forward, getting ahead of the ball, and everyone seemed to be, really in sync and playing well. There was none of that in this game. It just seemed very, very sluggish, and from the start. But with the cards falling another way, we could have won it. We just didn't come out on the right side this time.
Yeah, tight margins. Steve, Russell Martin said afterwards it wasn't far from a really good performance. Is that fair? Is it all about that first goal and not getting that, and then they get their tails up?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think. I mean, certainly, if you judged that result and performance based on the views of a number of people, a number of people that were in the ground, sort of around me, you'd have thought that that we'd have played a team 3 divisions below and lost 5-0. It was the ludicrous,
strange atmosphere,
ludicrous overreaction from some quarters. It's been very, very strange. But I guess we're in that situation now where everyone's seen how good we can be, and that we've been able to put it together for a consistent, very, very long, consistent period. And yeah, last night on Tuesday night, it just didn't quite fit together. We were all, it kind of felt like we were always about half a yard away from doing absolutely the right thing every time. First half, I mean, there was a lot of kind of dissent around Shea Charles's passing, which was, his radar was off a little bit, but actually I thought that his positioning was excellent in that midfield, to the extent that actually the reason why they were having to go Bristol City were having to go so wide was because Charles actually had control of that midfield from a defensive shield position perspective. So in that regard, we didn't actually miss Flynn Downs. Where we missed him was the being able to play that forward pass through the lines. And a number of times Charles misplaced a pass either straight to an opposition player or straight out of play. Kind of sort of ended quite a lot of our attacks before they'd even got started. So that was the only frustrating thing for me. I was really surprised though that we made the change at half time, because I thought that actually the positional, as I say, the positional side of things, it was working the way it was, and I'm not sure we really needed necessarily to change personnel immediately. It wasn't that much of a disaster. We were in the game, and arguably we actually created the better chances in that first half. Albeit only sort of 2 or 3 of them. But yeah, second half we obviously started really well, took advantage of a defensive mistake, and I think ultimately that was the catalyst of our downfall. Because while Brooks was excellent in the first half, he was running at players and he was getting into spaces and causing them a lot of problems without actually creating any actual chances. Once he'd basically almost rearranged himself around that goalpost, you could just tell he wasn't sort of able to move as freely. So the substitution, I mean, to be honest, probably came about 10 minutes later than I expected it to, given how he was moving sort of immediately after the incident. But yeah, second half we created a couple of chances, didn't we? With obviously the Walker Peters volley straight after they took the lead. I think if that goes in, then all of a sudden the mood changes, and we're then the ones with the momentum again all of a sudden. But keeper makes a decent save, and we didn't really threaten a huge amount after that. It was all a little bit disjointed. The substitutions changed the shape of the side, and the guys that came on didn't do a massive amount. Fraser was okay in patches. Mara had a couple of nice touches, and Sulemana kind of ran in sort of positive straight direction, but didn't then tended to kind of run into one of 3 players that were surrounding him. So it was just frustrating. I think once City got the lead, they were able to play in a more comfortable sort of holding pattern style and just pick us off on the break, because they know that the fullbacks are going to go forward. So there's always going to be space in behind. But yeah, I mean, it's one loss in 26. It's not a time for sort of heavy recriminations or sort of finger pointing and saying, "Oh, teams have worked us out."
Knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I mean, the only concern is ultimately we've conceded 6 goals in 2 games against at best mid-table opposition. That's a concern. But I think we kind of all suspect that that's a personnel thing.
I was going to say that
it'll be resolved as soon as Flynn Downs is back in the team.
Yeah, hope so. I mean, I think we need to talk about that, Glenn. I think you were the one that perhaps highlighted that with Will Smallbone playing as that number 6 or the defensive midfielder, whatever they like to call it, that's 6 goals conceded with him playing in front of the back 4. And although you would look immediately at the defense, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
but it's not just solely on him.
No, it's not solely on him, but he is. I struggle to think of a least suitable player to play that position. But it's not just. I mean, he doesn't want to play there. Russell Martin seems to have a bit of a blind spot and thinks that he can play there. If you look at the last 2 games, how many goals do we let in when Flynn Downs is on the pitch? None. How many do we let in with Shay Charles on the pitch? None. How many do we let in with a midfield 3 of Smallbone, Rothwell, and Stuart Armstrong? 6. It's quite glaring. You could argue that we've also scored a lot of goals. But as I said after the Huddersfield game, 3 goals a game, you're not going to win many. Rothwell meant we got away with it against Huddersfield because he scored 2 worldies, basically. That's not going to happen every week. And playing those three in midfield, you're basically playing a number 8 and 2 number 10s, and there's just not enough defensive nous there. I was delighted when Charles was picked because I was worried they were going to start with those three in midfield from the start, and I was horrified when he got taken off because I thought exactly the same as Steve. At the end of the day, we're still 0-0. Yes, some of his passing was very wayward, but the thing is that's like Russell Martin's worst thing, isn't it? He wants players who can keep the ball above all else. So he decided to take him off, and I think it was a bad decision. I really do, because you then haven't got a midfielder whose sole brief is to keep the back door shut, and we're just too open. We play, we push the fullbacks high. If we give the ball away in the middle of the park, the fullbacks are gone. I mean, I'd take the mick out of Ryan Manning all the time because his defending is a bit suspect, but it's not his fault if we give the ball away behind him, which is what we were tending to do yesterday. And, Flynn Downs stops so many counterattacks, usually by, his pace and his determination to get into the tackle. And Will Smallbone's not that sort of player. I mean, I sort of like have a joke about if Will Smallbone was coming back to his house and he turned the corner and it was on fire, he couldn't sprint to the house. It just a leisurely jog up to the front door.
So what is the option then? So if Flynn Downs is missing and like he is, he's been out, what is the option with that number 6?
Shay Charles is the backup. I mean, he's the only alternative we've got, really, to play that position. Jack Stephens, we've tried in midfield before and it didn't work, and I am surprised that it hasn't been tried yet, and I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if that is wheeled out on Friday if Flynn Downs is not fit, because it would be difficult to unless he's prepared to give Shay Charles another chance based on the fact that it was his first game for a while. He played the FA Cup, didn't he? It was his first game in midfield for quite a while. Maybe he'll give him another chance. Or maybe Jack Stephens in that central midfield role. But out of those three midfield, I mean, I actually think Stuart Armstrong would probably be more suitable for that position than Will Smallbone. But it's like putting a striker in. It's like putting a striker. It's like putting a striker in goal, though. He might do the odd thing, but ultimately he's going to get found out. And we cannot play those three in midfield and play them like we have. Because unless Rothwell's going to score 2 worldies a game, then it's just we're going to be chasing too many deficits, and it's just not going to work.
I thought Rothwell was decent again, actually, for an hour.
Did you think so? I didn't really notice him.
He was the one guy that obviously where the away end's right behind the goal, and I was quite high up, so you get a quite good sort of tactical view of how everything's being laid out. And you could see that he was the guy that was finding the space between the lines, and all the passes out of the centre backs were going to him. And he was the one that had the confidence and knowing that he had the time around him to turn and then drive forwards. He was the one that was doing that, and he got into some good positions. But final ball let us down a little bit. I mean, the pitch wasn't great.
They kept watering it, didn't they, as well? It looked like everyone kept falling over. It was.
It'd been hammering it down it'd been hammering it down all day. It was absolutely soaking. And you had that fairly ludicrous little passage of play in the first half where Edozie put the fullback on his backside and then proceeded to fall over himself when he was about to put the cross in. And it was like, well, what can you do when the conditions are what they are? But yeah, I mean, frustrating, but it is what it is.
Did you see the fullbacks getting switched over as well, Steve? We were trying to watching at home, trying to work out what was going on there. They swapped over for a bit. I think that was from a set piece where we had a corner and Manning had gone and it was on the right and Manning had taken the corner, and as a result, Walker Peters was covering the other side. Which then meant that Manning was effectively playing right back for a period, basically just until the ball went out. Right. I heard a school of thought this week, Glenn, that actually the now that the unbeaten run is over, we've been sidetracked by that a little bit, and maybe it takes the pressure off now. Do you think there's some sense in that, or is that complete nonsense?
It. I would hedge more towards the nonsense side of things. It's the sort of thing that club media want to talk about, and and it's a fun thing for the fans. Making up the chant and adding one to it every week
I'm
whilst
going to miss the chant.
we're still undefeated. But that I think players and managers are professional enough to just one game at a time. And I do largely believe that to be true. So I think it's more of a thing for media and fans than it is for actual players. But as Russell Martin has said, it's now about how we respond. I mean, he said we responded well last time, but we lost another 3 games before we responded well.
Oh God!
So we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that this time. Thank you, Russell. We want to respond well straight away, which is going to be difficult because very difficult opposition coming up, and obviously only 3 days break. West Brom played on Tuesday as well, though, so it's they had by all accounts a relatively comfortable game against Cardiff, but it is going to be a tough one against one of the stronger teams, and similar to Bristol City. Actually, they gave us a very good game at St Mary's and were unlucky to lose, to be honest, because we sort of like nicked it when I thought the game was going to be sort of meandering to a 1-1 draw, but there you go. So it is going to be tough, but now the unbeaten run's over, we can try and come up with a new song. And please don't sing one undefeated if we get a 0-0 draw on Friday. But
it was just infuriating, Steve, looking at the other results coming in, and obviously Ipswich played last night. I think Leicester won 2-0, didn't they? Swansea or Leeds beat Swansea 4-0, and then Ipswich scoring 4 goals last night. It just seems that we slip up and everybody else has got their foot on the gas at the moment.
But there's been enough weeks since the turn of the year where it's been the other way around, where we've been the only ones that have won and the others have all slipped up.
Yeah.
What was actually really noticeable from the other games involving the top sides this week was that they all got those games done very early. Leeds were 3 up inside 25 minutes, half an hour. Leicester had scored twice in 25. Who were the other ones? Ipswich were 3 up at half time as well at Millwall. So they were kind of able to coast through the second half of games, which is kind of what we've lacked for the most part away from home this season, other than that Swansea game, where we all thought, right, this is where we've worked out how to do it away from home, where we can now kind of effectively coast through half of the game and retain the energy. So yeah, I mean that's what we got to look for the next time we play somebody rubbish away from home. But it's, I mean, going to be waiting a few weeks, I think.
Yeah, big game. We're going to preview the West Brom game in just a moment. We always finish with a player of the week. I think, Glenn, you said, was it half-time or full-time? No one really deserves more than a 6 out of 10. Is there anybody that might have edged towards a 6.5?
I thought our best 2 players were Sam Edozie and Kyle Walker-Peters. Some of Kyle's positioning defensively was a bit suspect. I thought Sam Edozie was our brightest attacker. But you could argue David Brooks before he got injured. But other than that, I'm struggling a bit. I just thought it was a game where no one really grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and made anything happen really. The usual suspects, the 2 central defenders, who are usually excellent. They, I think Bednarek will be a bit disappointed in the header from the corner, and Howard Bellis looked a little bit shaky. So so I don't think anyone really stood out, but Edozie and Walker-Peters, if anyone.
I was thinking Flynn Downs by not playing. One of those weeks where the player that doesn't play actually,
his reputation certainly enhanced on the back of that. That's for sure.
Stock goes up. Anyone else you want to add to the little poll which we're going to do online, Steve?
I mean, Bazunu was fine. I mean, first half. I mean, you can tell by like a goalkeeper's confidence is when their starting position is excellent.
Yeah.
And the way he read that through ball that was played in behind Howard Bellis and got there just before the attacker did was absolute sign that he's kind of confident in his own game. He knows exactly where he needs to be and timed it superbly.
The attacker absolutely crapped himself as well, which was funny.
You would though, wouldn't you? All right, we'll get that poll on social media a little later.